Welcome to season 4, Fostering Change, the #1 podcast in adoption and foster care. Each week we speak to the most amazing good humans about topics that touch each and every one of us. If you have a guest suggestion or interested in sponsoring our podcast, please visit us at fosteringchange@comfortcases.org. Now, sit back, enjoy, learn, get motivated, and let's speak to some fascinating guests. Well, it's hard to believe that this is our 4th season of Fostering Change. And every single week, I am probably one of the luckiest people because I get to talk to some amazing humans who have amazing stories. Most of you who read my memoir know that it was very hard for me to write. It was hard for me as someone who had been in banking for a little over 28 years to allow people to know truly where I had come from. So when my next guest actually had written their memoir and someone had sent it to me and I sat down and read it, I literally was shocked. And let me tell you what I was shocked about. I wasn't shocked about the story because I've heard stories about children who've grown up in the system or starting off in an orphanage or, just not being able to have the luck in some ways that so many of us have. But what I absolutely loved about this book is how raw it was when it came to telling their story. So, ladies and gentlemen, before I continue on, the book is called On the Road Less Traveled, An Unlikely Journey from the Orphanage to the Boardroom. Ed, welcome to Fostering Change.
Rob, it's always good to talk to you.
My friend.
Love your enthusiasm.
I will tell you, there are so many things I need to get into, but the one thing that I really want to jump at immediately is that, when I go around the country as a public speaker, one of the things I remind people all the time is to don't blame the system, but try to help me change the system. And there was a line that you said, and I want to actually quote you on this, is you said, later in life, I realized that my childhood seemed to give me a foundation from recognizing the need for balance between self, family, work, and community. And what I got out of that is exactly what I said. You weren't blaming the system of how you came in. You weren't blaming your community because maybe they had forgotten you. You weren't blaming the fact that you were one of the statistics that we see every day, but you were actually giving praise that what you had gone through, gave you so much of a foundation. So I want to jump right into that. Let's talk about the fact that here you are, a young boy, and I got to tell you a quick story. I wasn't going to share this, but I'm going to tell you this. So when I was about 4 years old, I was sitting in the front yard of my father's house. My mother had been gone for, I couldn't even tell you how long. It could have been a year. I had not laid eyes on her, had not heard about her, nothing. And I was in the front yard playing as a little boy, and a car pulled up, and the woman got out of the car, and it was my mother. And she looked at me and she said, "Come here." And I walked over to her and she said, "Go inside and get your sister and do not say a word." And I went inside and I got my sister and I came outside, and my sister and I got into my mother's car and we drove away, and I never saw my father again.
Wow. Oh, everybody has a story. Wow.
So when I read your book and you talk about that, tell me about that moment as a young boy where you're getting into your father's vehicle and you're leaving.
Well, I didn't know we were going to go to the park or go to the movies. And he decided, instead of taking me, back to my mother, he decided to basically kidnap me. Got around 1,800 miles from St. Louis to Los Angeles. So we drove back together in his 1936 Ford Roadster. It took about 3 or 4 days. And in those days, motels didn't really allow children, so he had to sort of sneak me in at night. But I, being 3 years old, you don't really recognize that. You remember it because it was such a horrendous experience. But, you don't understand exactly what just happened. In addition, a month or so before, I was taken the other direction. My mother got custody of me and took me from Los Angeles to St. Louis. So I was kind of, a little bit befuddled. But according to my father, I was not well kept. And he was very disturbed that I was not very well dressed. And because he was a nut on this anyway. So he decided to take me. And by my mother figured she was very going to be welcomed at her family. And she wasn't. So when I disappeared, she was a woman who thought and didn't feel. He was a man who felt and didn't think that much, didn't know what it was to have a 3-year-old. But she basically felt that given that her family wasn't enthusiastic about she and me, that maybe I would be better off with my father. So that was her feeling. And he, of course, couldn't do without me, but he didn't realize what it was to have a 3-year-old. But what you said about this, I talked about balance between family work, and community. There's an underlying principle in the whole area there is never be a victim if you can help it. I know it's hard, but don't blame anybody, because the energy it takes to blame people or a situation, that you use that energy up, you should be using the energy to decide what's next, because that's the most important thing. What's past is past. Whoever's done you in, it's okay. Just go on. Because I must say, you look at my book a couple of times, sometimes it was my fault, sometimes it was my situation's fault. I never blamed it. I moved on, and that really saved me. And
Yeah,
in terms,
you know,
it's really
Ed,
very
Ed,
important.
Ed, I mean, there's so many things that I learned about you in your book, and so many things I learned about you by Googling you as well. And you're a person who you give so much. You give so much. There was a moment that I actually almost picked up the phone to call you because I wanted to know why. Why, for someone who you have, raised a beautiful, amazing children, you have the most amazing wife, Barbara. But why did you feel the need to write this book?
Oh, I didn't. I didn't want to write it. I buried my life about 18 years old when I went to college. But in my 70s, my wife, and particularly my daughter, you said that you had trouble writing about your life. I couldn't write the first draft of my childhood. My daughter had to write it. My daughter, my wife, and my 2 sons both said, Dad, you got to put this out on paper. It's just time. And the University of Rochester also, I was chairman of the board. They said, we just can't say you came from a post office box in San Francisco. We got to find a little more about you. And then, Horatio Alger basically dug in and got it. So as long as it was getting out there, I figured I'd best write it, because I have to separate, facts from what I remember. And once I got into it, I found it to be fascinating, because, when you start writing down about yourself, you learn about yourself. You also learn why you make certain kinds of decisions. People say, hey, here's why I made the decision. It goes all the way back to your childhood. Yeah. Your childhood builds certain things into you that cause you to make decisions a certain way. And this business about never being a victim, I pass that on to people, because it looks like, for whatever reason, as a youngster, I just moved on. I guess because I had to, I suppose.
Yeah, there's a place that I marked in your book that I absolutely, I had those moments within my life, like where, there were times when I was homeless and the teacher would always bring me extra food, or the job that I needed, that if I didn't get that job, I was one step away from losing my apartment. And there's a place in your book, page 44, you says, as fate would have it, attending Roosevelt High School provided me with yet another lucky break. I love how that you say that often in your book, that you got these lucky breaks. Do you truly now, as you reading the book, feel that it was luck, or was it really something?
I had a wonderful question at college the other day. A young man asked me whether I thought I was blessed or just lucky, and I said both.
Oh,
I'm blessed. No, I've been very lucky. I was born at the right time in the right country. And I've had a wave behind me, but I did have these lucky breaks, because in the first orphanage, when my father disappeared, I became a ward of the state. And in those days, if you were a ward of the state, you could have gone to a reform school, for boys. So there were a lot of places that were not very nice. They sent me to this orphanage in Yonkers, New York, which was 4 blocks from a high school where 80% of the kids went to private colleges. So I had a model. I all of a sudden, quickly, when I walked in there as a sophomore, I said, I see my ticket out of here, out of my situation, which was go to a private college. And they said, no way, because you have no money, and you have no parents and so forth. I said, I'm going to a private college, and that's what luckily I got a scholarship. Now, those days, you didn't have a lot of scholarships either.
right.
So people said to me, how is things different today? Kids have so much more, scholarships. They have much more opportunity. There are more people like you helping. Those days there were no. In fact, if you went to a counselor, it was a negative. You didn't admit that you had problems. So things have changed positively. I think the foster care system is much better than it was, but I really wanted to bury it. But once I started to tell the story, it really became very interesting to me. And as a youngster, did have some breaks. I was good at math and science. Yonkers, I mean, Roosevelt High School was a very fine high school, good teachers, but 80% of the kids went to private colleges. So if they're going to go, I'm going to go. And everybody said, you're crazy because you can't afford it, and so on and so forth. You haven't got the clothes, you haven't got anything. And I got the scholarship and, went there. It was a tough first year because, as I tell people like me, and you will relate to this, you not only, look different, feel different, but you are different.
Yes.
And it takes a while to convert over to being a little more like everybody else. Because if you're very different, people don't accept you. It's unfortunate, but especially in those days, poor kids didn't go to college. I mean, if everybody goes out drinking, you got to have the money to go out drinking. If you don't go out drinking, you're different. If you haven't got a tweed jacket, and everybody's got a tweed jacket, you're different. And so that people don't shun you, but you don't become part of the crowd. It took me a year or so. I finally melded in, and I actually was very successful. Got my tweed jacket, and I worked constantly through college. I mean, I did everything. I waited tables. I worked in the laundry, and I told my famous story was, those days you had to have a typewriter, and I couldn't afford a typewriter, so I wrote 6 typewriter companies saying, I'd like to be your representative on campus. You'll send me a sample. So one of the typewriter companies sent me a sample, and I used the typewriter for 3 years, and I sold just 2 typewriters in 3 years.
I love that. I love that. And what you just said, no matter what, we are different, we are different. And that was something, and it was the reason why, I didn't want to tell my story, is because, like you said, you buried it for all those years. I buried it because I was scared what people would say.
But would react to exactly right.
Yep.
And
how they would judge me
either. I didn't want sympathy either.
No,
you don't want that. You want to be basically on your own merits.
Yes.
I don't want any sympathy.
Yes.
So that's why I don't want anybody to say, "Oh, I had to get." No, don't do that. That's very healthy. But you really didn't want to tell everybody that you're so different.
Right. Right. I wanted to climb that corporate ladder on my own, and not because of what my story was.
Right.
Listen, everybody, the book is called On the Road Less Traveled. It is absolutely one of these books, by the way, it is a perfect time of year. It's nice and cold, curl up in front of that fireplace. And I guarantee you, much just like I did, you'll start it and you can't wait to get up the next morning to finish it, because I actually finished it in one day. Listen, we're going to be right back with my friend Ed. We've got a lot more questions. Again, you can get the book on the Road Less Traveled, an unlikely journey from the orphanage to the boardroom. And we're going to talk about
there's also an audio version as well.
Oh, and an audio version as well. And
if you're a listener instead of a reader, there's a great audio version.
Love that. We'll talk about that when we come back. We'll be right back. This episode of Fostering Change is sponsored by Comfort Cases, a national nonprofit that inspires our communities to bring hope and dignity to our youth that are in foster care. For just $10 a month, you can support the Comfort Cases mission and help us eliminate trash bags for kids who are entering foster care. For every $10 that you give, Comfort Cases will give a Comfort XL to a child entering the system. Be part of the change. Visit comfortcases.org. Well, you know what? I never, ever cease to amaze myself when it comes to being able to start talking to someone and having that feeling like I've always known them. And the best part about it is when you get to read their memoir. One of the things that I want to talk about is that I am just in awe about the philanthropy that you do. The fact that in 2008, you gave $30 million to the University of Rochester. The fact that you have, and I've seen this, by the way, you and I are both businessmen, and I've seen where people who have come up from their bootstraps and have, made it, they forget about everybody else and they think about themselves. And it's all about the business and they stay tunnel vision. But you've done something different than is that it's like me for 28 years. I gave my banking job to run my charity. You have literally said, you know what? I need to do more than just one thing. And so I really want to talk about what all of a sudden first was the aha moment for you to write a check for $30 million. But what is the aha moment that you keep doing things like that?
Now, let me go back to my basic principles, and one of the things I'm basically selling to people who read my book and think about me. So life has four parts. Self takes you a long time. 18 to 25, you develop self, carry it the rest of your life. Family, the most important thing you have. Work, you have to focus on it or you're not going to contribute. The final one is community, which is charity. Community, giving back. It's the reason we're on the planet. And therefore, that has to be part of your life. If you want a full life, you have to cover those four areas. Now, once you cover those four areas, by the way, I didn't give $30 million to the University of Rochester. My family did. I called everybody together. I said, hey, guys, two sons and a daughter and my wife. And I said, we you know how much money we have. We don't have a lot of money. I want to give a substantial portion of our net worth to the University of Rochester. And I said, I need your compliance because your money, not my money. Then he said, go for it, Dad. So that was a real breakthrough. But that was the reason. And why shouldn't you give back? I mean, I started with nothing. The society, the system has allowed me to do very well. I have to give it back to the system. I'd rather give it back to the system than the government for sure. So
Yeah.
that's one of the other excuses that I use. And I really believe, as one of my other taglines or cliches, people are nasty, they call them cliches, but I think that education is the solution to everything or almost everything. And therefore, and I guess scholarships was changed my life, and I've watched it change so many lives so far. Kids, I have scholarships at about 8 or 9 institutions now, and kids write me letters. My life has changed. I'm a different person. Wasn't for you, that kind of stuff. That's a heart pounder. Well, when you take care of a kid and a kid does better than he ever thought he would or she would, it's a big deal. So that's it. And I'm really a little bit selfish because I get all this accolade, all these presents that people give me saying how well I've done for them. And it's just money that I've given away. And
Yeah.
obviously I spend some time with them as well. But so that's the real reason, is that I really believe that if the system gives you so much, you must give back to them. And also it's part of life.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, I agree. I agree
know
with
people,
you.
exactly what you said. I know people who never got that satisfaction. They made a lot of money. They were very successful businessmen. They never took that next step
Yeah.
of using that money to help others and getting that extra satisfaction in life. When you close your eyes, you say, I did a good job in business. I did a good job, reasonable job in family. Nobody does a great job in family. Too tough.
That's true.
And
That is
I
true.
did a good job in giving back. And so, so it is those four parts, and there may be more parts for other people, but those are the four parts. You and I both have had self problems, and we've somewhat solved them to be able to absorb ourselves in society. We have the family. We're doing that. I read your book. You started reading your book. It's a family forever. And work. You have to be successful in work, because if you don't, you got to produce something in order to get a return, and then you give it back. And that's what I call when you close your eyes, say, hey, I've done a decent job in the four areas of life. So
Yeah, I remind people all the time that your community is not your zip code. Our community is our human race. And
exactly.
Reese and I, we are very big on education, and that's why we give us a couple of scholarships every year away through our organization. And I will tell you, the look on these kids' faces when they get announced that they've won the scholarship is, first of all, it's priceless. I met a young girl just recently. She was in 7 high schools,
Ooh,
but still pushed her way to go to college. And she was still a sophomore in her 3rd year trying to get through, but she wasn't giving up. And that little bit of push that we gave her by giving her the scholarship that we gave her, she actually reached out to me and she said, Rob, she says, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. And that is, like you said, when you close your eyes.
that's your aha moment. That's your aha
Oh,
moment.
oh
I'm
my
going to make it.
gosh.
Or if it wasn't for you, Rob, I wouldn't be here.
You
That
know,
whole thing.
and that they didn't give up, that they
that didn't.
didn't
No,
give
no,
up.
no.
You
And
know, Ed, what are some of the things, the fact is that you talk about, filling your cup in more than just one ways, not just about business, but being completely full circle. I'd love to hear about some of the other things that you do that could, push other people in such a direction of giving, which is something that we try to do here at Fostering Change. What are some of the other things that
Well,
you're
I involved
dabbling
in schools from the very beginning. I started as the class, whatever his class fellow for my first grade class at my first son's school. I ended up as chairman of the board of trustees, and really helped change the school. Had the largest giving program there and so forth. My wife was actually head of development for a while. My favorite story was when I stepped down from the chairman of the board of trustees and I was giving the baton to the next guy, and I said, I am so committed to this school as I go home and sleep with the head of development every night.
in?
There was some phone calls the next morning to the headmaster asking what the hell's going on. But anyway, and at Harvard, I became the president of the Alumni Association. And there we did some very interesting things. We produced courses for people that already graduated, like something called the Entrepreneur's Toolkit, where people came back and learned about entrepreneurism. And then at Rochester, I already got involved, where I basically really sponsored raising money for scholarships and for programs and professorships and so on. And we changed the school there. The president did a fabulous job, but we raised more money for the school in the 8 years I was the chairman than the entire previous 150 years. But that's just one little area. What you really want to do is in your community, like we did here up in Nantucket, we founded a golf course and it became successful. We had 300 members, everybody's going along fine. But within a couple of years, we realized we had another mission, which was to be part of the community. And we started something called the Children's Charity. And today it's sent over 35 kids to college. And we started a vocational scholarship program. And now we sent 10 kids to vocational schools last year. Just like you said, we had 2 young ladies, both of them going to be nurses. I mean, it would tear your heart out. She said, Grandma was a nurse, Mom was a nurse, I'm going to be a nurse. And then there was another young man that said, basically, he said, I've always wanted to basically fix cars, and I'm going to an automotive technology school. And another, and I've involved the same thing here up in Nantucket. And we've converted the golf course into an institution. It's the largest charity on the island. Supplies money to 50 charities every year, plus the scholarship program. And we're going to expand the scholarship program because people become totally unbelievably generous. Our first gala was like $500,000-$600,000. This year we raised $4.7 million from a gala with about 100 members. There were 300 people, but they invite guests, and the guests jump in. Now, in addition, down in Florida where I'm located, again continuing this concept, my mini crusade on vocational scholarships, I joined a bunch of people that have built an Upper Keys Community College.
Love that.
Even though the Nantucket kids are terrific, to listen to this woman at our community college talk about her always wanting to be a public safety officer. She's a single mother with 2 children. I mean, you'd have brought tears to your eyes. But here we're training 60 nurses, a bunch of first responders, a bunch of marine engineers down in this Keys Community College. Because I believe that, not everybody should go to a 4-year college.
I agree.
If you have a passion for something else, exercise it.
I agree.
I'd like to change the name from vocational to technical or something else. But I remember when I was a young man, you had a commercial and academic. People went into commercial, some went to academic. But I'm continuing that. And Keys College, I'm going to become more involved with that because that's really exciting because you're taking a community which really needs education and also has a great need for jobs. I mean, marine engineering down there is a big deal. The hospital needs nurses and so on and so forth. We're really supplying people. But I get a kick out of one of the young men at our place that wanted to be a chef. And a chef, you go to Johnson Wells, it's $40,000 a year for 2 years. And this kid immediately went into the kitchen at the country club. And he's leaving, obviously, now to go on to Johnson Wells. But, he really wants to cook. God bless him. And we need people like that. So I just think everybody should, whatever they get mixed up in, ask that next question. What else can I do for the community? And by the way, you start, 22 years ago with nothing. You have a little dinner for people. And you have, 10 or 15 people you get together. And all of a sudden you have something after 25 years. That's really important to the whole community. And also, we're going to take this model, and we have an article written for a golf magazine. Any golf course that's in a community. Now, if you're in New York City, it's a little different. But if you're in a community where you're major part of the community, you should think about doing what we just did.
I agree with
Not
you. I
only, by the
agree.
way, did we provide money, but the 500 families we brought to the island over the 25-year period, most of the organizations today are headed up or involved. These people are involved as well. So you're getting not only human, funds, but you're getting human capital as well.
Yeah, I
And there
agree.
are communities around the country that have that. But anyway, that's been my thing. My wife's been the same way. She's always been involved in development. She was one of the key people in developing a little museum here, which now is a gem on the island. It's just that other question. You have to work. There's no two ways about it. You got to focus on it, be successful. But
I
always
agree.
try to figure out something else that you can do, because there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction in doing some of these other things as well.
Oh my gosh, let me tell you something. I say it all the time. I hope my legacy is about what I give and not what I've taken.
Beautiful.
And I
Beautiful.
truly believe that each and every one of us, we have an opportunity to give. And so that's what I would love to hear. Listen, everybody, this conversation has been absolutely amazing. You reach out to me all the time. You ask me, what book are you reading right now, Rob? What book do you suggest? Listen, this is it. This is it. On the Road, Less Traveled. Season 4 is kicked off, and it's going to be real hard, my friends, for someone to say to me that this isn't the book that I'm going to remember as I end this season. Listen, Ed, as we end this, I have to repeat a quote that you said. And because I actually was so just in awe of this quote that I've actually had it cut out of my sample letter part, and it's actually stuck to my desk because I never want to forget it. And the quote is, "Don't be a victim of circumstances. Don't let your environment define your future. Even the pandemic, stay forward motion." I'm going to tell you, I took that trash bag, and for so long, I tried to make sure that it did not define who I was. And when I read that quote, that's all I kept thinking about. So I want to say to you, my friend, that quote was absolutely amazing.
And
look
try
at
this
that.
book out too.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Thank
well,
you
listen,
so much.
everyone.
I do believe that, though.
It's a great quote.
Shouldn't stop you.
It's a great quote. Listen, I know that I have lots of professors that listen to our podcast and watch it. I know I have a lot of people that reach out to me and say, I could use a public speaker. I could use someone that could motivate. I'm telling you, this is the person to reach out to. Ed, we're going to plaster all your information so people can reach out to your publicists. We're going to make sure that we have a link to your book because, again, this book, On the Road Less Traveled, an unlikely journey from the orphanage to the boardroom. Listen, everyone, this is a prime example of what I say each week, being a good human, really investing in your community, trying to see how you can make the foundation of a child stronger today than it was yesterday. And we know that if we make that foundation strong, the only person that is actually benefiting from it is you, because it's your future. Your future. So why would you not want that foundation strong? Until next time, this is Fostering Change. I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for listening or watching the latest episode of Fostering Change. All of us on our team hope that you have learned something new today and have been inspired to be a good human. Now, just a reminder that you can always find Fostering Change on your favorite channels on Google, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and others, including, of course, comfortcases.org. I want to give a big thank you to all of you for joining us each and every week. And a reminder that if you have a suggestion for a guest, or maybe you might have a question about today's podcast, or are interested in becoming a sponsor of Fostering Change, please don't hesitate to email me personally at fosteringchange@comfortcases.org. Now, that's it for now. Thanks again, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Take care.